Hello there, and welcome to Gooner U, where there are no degrees because the learning never stops. I'm Dove, a TA here at Gooner U, and my friend Keith is our stalwart distinguished professor of Arsenal and football studies. This week featured Premier League matches number 15 and 16 at Kenilworth Road against Luton and at Villa Park against Aston Villa. Hello, Keith.
Hello, Dove. That was some week, wasn't it?
Yeah, some week. That's about how I'd characterize it.
There was a lot going on, and I obviously jinxed it by closing with us being at the top of the table, as we no longer are at the top of the table. But it's fine. It's fine for now. It's fine.
Still plenty of time to make it up.
I'm not going to pay. Oh, and plenty of opportunities, but we'll deal with that later.
Sure. So before we get into this week's events, one question I'd intended to ask last week and then dropped the ball was, as I've mentioned before, I managed to get myself on Arsenal's email list. And so every match day, I send an email with an overview of the team and some stats. They show your form and their form, stuff like that, or our form and their form. It's kind of funny seeing how many times we've played against each club too. Like, I think 2 weeks ago was our fifth or sixth appearance against Lons before. Like, that was kind of funny to compared to the Premier League teams. It's a lot,
right? The 202nd or something against Manchester United. Yeah.
Right. So at the bottom of the Wolves match preview email, they use the phrase, it's match day in N5, and I had no idea whether that was a level of British intelligence or if it was a stadium or what it was. What is N5 referring to?
So N5 is the postal code for the area of North London. N stands for North, and it's N5 around the Highbury district, which is... I'm not actually sure. I'd be curious to see. So, I mean, granted, Professor Wikipedia's list here, it says N5 covers Highbury, which where the old stadium was. Now, the current stadium is officially in Holloway, which apparently is actually N7. Now, again, this is according to this Wikipedia page, which I have no idea. I'm sure it's accurate. I just don't know where that means relatively the lines are drawn.
Right.
But I think that's just one of those old... sort of old ways of referring to, or just another sort of local coded reference, like you'd hear, the Yankees, it's another day on 161st Street. Kind of that local marker that somebody nearby would be like, oh yeah.
Right. Okay. And yeah, that does not, to my eyes, resemble anything related to mail. So
yeah, well, it's a smaller country, so there are only so many postal cards.
Sure. So, meanwhile, there was some excitement in MLS this week, right?
A little bit. They had just a bit. The end of the season, the MLS Cup was given out and won. I really should say they didn't just, pick a winner. The team won. The Columbus Crew win their third MLS Cup. They beat LAFC, the defending champs, 2-1. I didn't see any of the game. I had other things going on Saturday, but congrats to Columbus. LA, I mean, certainly to have won the cup last year and to come this close to coming back and winning it again. Plus, they went deep in the CONCACAF Champions League. They had a couple of other long spells in the season. They apparently played something like 60 games this year. Played a massive number of games for an MLS team. So, came up just a little short of. I don't think they actually officially. I think the only thing they won this year was Western Conference champions.
Okay.
So didn't win the Supporter
Which landed
Shield.
them in the Cup competition.
Well, the Western Conference title. Didn't win Supporter Shield. Didn't win. They lost the final of the Champions League. I think they lost the Campeones Cup as well. Didn't win the U.S. Open Cup. Obviously, didn't win MLS Cup. But still, that's it's kind of wild. This Arsenal last year is not a fair comparison. We of course did not win anything. But it's amazing how successful a season can, or rather. If you define your success only by trophies, it's amazing how much success you can have over the course of a season to the extent that LA did, and come away feeling like you didn't actually get anything out of it. So it really is, I think, a good illustration of the old process versus results argument when it comes to sports. Is it the destination or the journey? And I have for many years had to enjoy the journeys of Arsenal because the destinations have been a bit lacking fourth place trophy gets a little tiresome, but that's okay. It's okay.
And in other Arsenal news, I saw the women did very well against the much hyped Chelsea match that happened. They won 4-1. So.
Yes, a major result. Chelsea is one of the top contenders for the league title. I believe I forgot to look at the standings. They are they are I believe tied at the same record on top of the league. So it's good. Chelsea are the defending champs. They're one of the key competitors with Arsenal at the top of the Women's Super League. So that's a big win, and it's exciting for them. And they were in the Emirates and drew a not quite sold out, but still a massive crowd at the Emirates for that game. So
yeah,
pretty good. Pretty good.
Nicely done, ladies. Drawing out. Before we talk about the week's matches a little bit more, one kind of meta question about the week. Why did we have 2 Premier League matches in the same week? That was something I was wondering going into it. And especially, I think I know the answer after seeing the weekend match and seeing the live table and seeing that we have the same number of matches played as everyone else. Was it just that the league did that because there was a break in Champions League and Europa League play or something? Or...
Yeah, pretty much. So remember, they have 38 games to get in, and of course they have a window of time between August and May to get them all in. You're going to lose a couple of weekends due to the holidays, due to the FA, the first, at least the third and fourth rounds of the FA Cup. There's a couple of other points in the season where you're going to lose games. And so there is a push at various points to double up on weeks to make sure you squeeze every game in so you can fit them all through. And this one we can tell was planned because everybody played both a midweek game and a weekend game. So there was a lot filling in that space. And right now, as we said, everybody's on the same number of games. Which makes the table a little bit nicer to read. As you know, it's going to get a little weirder by the time we get to like March and February for reasons we've talked about. But we'll start to see that.
Yeah. So we opened the week with a fun match to watch against Luton, and fun in a totally different way than our previous fun match where we won 6-0. This was a different kind of fun. This was a scrappy fun.
Fun is an interesting word for it. First off, welcome to Kenilworth Road. I mean, your front row seat. It does feel like even on the camera, really, you're really kind of in there. We talked a little bit about how a lot of the newly promoted sides had they been struggling. They're favorites to go down. I think that's still largely true, but Luton is one that's actually really sort of settled into their season and really kind of made themselves a bit more of a nuisance, particularly at home. They already have a 3-3 draw with Liverpool. 1-1 draw with Liverpool, at that ground back in the beginning of November, about a month before our game. So that is not an easy place to go. And so to eventually have pulled off the win is nice, but it took a bit of a winding road to get there.
Right. So, sorry, we had a bit of an audio issue, so I was just catching up on the words that had come out of your mouth. if it looks a little weird, that's why. So, so when I say it's fun, I mean, it's like, it's not a game you tune out of, right? Like, I was actively engaged the whole time. They were a strong side. They were, to me at least, an unexpectedly strong side. They really put up a good fight, and we had a pretty good showing too. I think, we connected a lot more clearly than we did against Aston Villa, although maybe we ended up actually possibly overall with more chances, I feel like, against Aston Villa. But it was good. It was a good outing. And then, I mean, the way that it ended, you can't beat that. And it's becoming our signature.
It is a game. And so first off, I should break down by sort of explaining how I watch this game. Obviously, I prefer to watch games live, and this was in the middle of the day on a school day, so I was a little busy for much of the game. But checking phone here and there, I saw that we had an early lead, 1-0. All right, nice, good. I checked a little bit later, saw it was 1-1. It's like, okay, all right, these things happen. and then saw right before, checked it right around halftime and saw it was 2-1. Okay.
Yeah.
Got a little busy, packed up, went home. I get home. I flipped on right after the Havertz goal, and the score pops up, and it's 3-3, and I'm just thinking, what the heck happens? I mean, there were other words I kind of used that I can't use on the show, but it was more like, what? Wait, 3-3? What is happening? It's kind of one of those, and again, of course, I'm getting kind of bits and pieces of how the game is played out, and then, of course, watching ultimately what ends up being about the last half hour or so. It's an interesting game the way you talk about the number of chances. I see a lot of the statistics of the game, and it's really the statistics of the game and the scoreline tell two different stories, because statistically in this game we ran them off the field. I mean, we were a dominant team, and the word I heard used a little bit in the aftermath, especially coming to the end, was we were talking about the Avengers a little earlier. It's the Thanos joke. The Arsenal was inevitable, that they just kept coming and coming and coming, and finally, I mean, for Luton to defend as much as they did, I mean, that entire last half hour was played almost entirely in their end. And to defend, and essentially at the last minute, they finally broke. The pressure was just too much in the end, and so statistically, look at this game and thinking, how do we not win this one? Like, how is this not like 4-1? Like, how is this? And then you see some of the opportunities they got, and to be fair, they took their chances. Luton played very physically. Which is a legitimate strategy. There's a certain amount of physicality. They talk historically what they call the rainy night in Stoke. You're too new of a fan to remember Stoke City, whose very name is almost something of a punchline, even amongst longtime fans of the sport. That it's just a physical side, and one of those that we've sort of talked about this in other contexts, right? There are certain teams that are really physical that almost seem to be allowed to get away with it. Like, kind of the expectation is they can't really do anything else than that. So, well, they're going to kick you a few times. Just got to kind of work your way through that. And that's obviously very frustrating for all the reasons you can imagine. Yeah. But, by the time I got on, I hadn't seen a lot of that. By the time I came on, I know a couple of the changes have been made. At that point, Arsenal had all the pressure on them. But the important thing for Luton's perspective is they got a handful of opportunities, and they were able to really, to really take advantage of them. I mean, you actually saw the goals live. I think about the Luton ones. What did you think in these instances? So,
for one thing, and I will answer your question. I do want to find out, is Stoke City an actual place, or is it allegorical?
No. It was a real. They were in the league about a decade ago.
So that was the name of a team, or
yes, Stoke.
Right.
Yes,
okay, and that's just City. The way that they played.
Yeah. So that was the stokiest goal and that. Yeah. Things like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Their name becomes the adjective.
Right. Okay. So anyways, yeah, I mean, to begin with, 2 out of their 3 goals were from corner kicks. And I think actually 2 out of their 3 goals, I think with an overlap of 1, were Raya goofs that allowed the goal to go in. So you had the one where we saw the consequence of missing a cross when he goes to catch it, and he was muscled out of position, and it landed on the ground, and I think it got headed in by the guy who muscled him out of position. There was no one there to stop it, so that one went in. And then you had another one where it kind of went underneath his side as he fell on the ground. It really felt like that was one he should have been able to get and didn't.
Yeah. I mean, looking at the corner kick goals, I mean, for a team like Luton that's going to be coming from behind and needs those opportunities, corner kicks are great opportunities because they're probably more likely to get the ball into the box to be able to play it in a way they probably can't do through open play, through the open run. And so for them to have that kind of opportunity, that's a dangerous moment for us in these kinds of games in particular, because they're going to have so few opportunities. By and large, we've overall been very good at dealing with set pieces, especially corners. It's kind of one of those things where when you give up a goal on a corner, it's easy to focus on all the times you failed, and all of a sudden it's like, how we always give up goals on corners. Our corner record is actually pretty good overall, especially relative to the other teams in the league. But this was not good. This one was not very. This was not a very good set of games, set of circumstances, and so that's not that. But it's frustrating. And then you saw there, Raya. I don't want to go nuts on goaltending in terms of evaluating each of them game by game. Obviously, We're critical of Ramsdale and all that, and there's always going to be a certain degree of comparison. Although, I think it's obvious that David Raya is the number one. There's no real competition.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah, and so get criticism of him is not saying Ramsdale should start. No. But yeah, he goofed on at least two of those. He deserves some criticism for missing that one, the corner. That was was that the first goal, I think?
Yeah, I believe that was, yeah.
And then frankly their third one, that goal there, it was interesting. So the bits I caught were through Peacock, and Tim Howard was in the studio there, and Howard was did you watch this one live?
Luton I did not watch live because I was at work in the city that day actually, and pretty beat by the time I got home, and I watched the replay the next day, but I think I watched the whole replay at one stretch, or maybe in only a couple sittings.
Yeah. So the analysis, actually, in one of the analysts there was Tim Howard, who played who was the keeper for the U.S. national team, among others, for a number of years. Was at Everton for a bunch of years. Was pretty well regarded there. So a guy who knows goaltending, knows goalkeeping. And he was very critical of Raya especially on that third goal. He talked about his positioning. I think he said something like Raya's not set forward. He's kind of leaning back a little bit, and so he's not in a position to handle the ball. I think you're right. I think you made that comment. He kind of goofs. It's a ball he probably should stop. He doesn't do a particularly good job on handling that opportunity. But yeah, they were. It is a credit to Arsenal that they took those punches, so to speak, and they never folded, they never backed down. There was just a constant pressure, and you get to those last 30 minutes, and they just basically laid siege to the Luton goal.
Mm-hmm. I just consulted with the highlights, and knows the second one was the one that he missed. The first header, he didn't have a chance. It was like into the top corner, and that is absolutely the one goal that you can't blame Raya for, realistically.
Yeah. So. Right, yeah, I knew there were the two corner ones. I just never remember which was which.
But yeah, I noted throughout the match, Jesus was having a very strong day. It just felt inevitable he was going to score. He just kept on coming at them over and over again. And I think he only scored one directly, but he contributed to another, I think, by when all was said and done. And it was a strong showing. And I think ultimately not really that much better than against Aston Villa. It's just they converted the chances. They got like a comparable number of chances. They just converted them better in this match. Yeah,
and we'll talk more about the Villa game. But yeah, I think in a little bit. But yeah, they really converted their opportunities. And I think they generated more and more dangerous ones in this game. And some of that's just a goal from quality. Luton is battling relegation. Villa now currently sits third. That's a huge difference.
Oh, sure.
To in terms of where they're going to be, and some of the abilities that they bring to the field, and sort of things they've done. Strange point of comparison. Luton and Villa both had essentially reversed the same schedule. Luton played Arsenal midweek, and then Manchester City on the weekend. Villa played Manchester City midweek, and then Arsenal on the weekend.
Oh, okay.
So an interesting week for those two teams.
That's fun.
But yeah, I thought, I did think there was greater pressure and a lot more danger from the chances we created. And overall, just more of them, even in that stretch. Just looking at that last half hour, but I have to be honest. As we were ticking in towards stoppage time, you sort of get that feeling that and it's hard not to get that feeling at points where you just sort of say to yourself, I just don't think they're going to get it. I just don't think they're going to do it. 'Cause it's hard. It's hard to score a goal.
Well, and especially once you get beyond the minimum stoppage time, you really just get to feel like, I guess that's it.
Yeah. Well, and there were clear instances, and we saw it also in the Villa game as well. The referees are watching the clock, and yes, you have 5 minutes of stoppage time or whatever it is. If they feel the other team is time wasting during stoppage time, which happens, they'll add the time. The referee remember when they make the announcement, it is a minimum of that much stoppage time. If they need to add more, they will. And overall, we'll have plenty of things to say about the referees, but overall, I think that's something they're generally very good at. And which does make the instances where it doesn't happen stand out, and you're like, oh, but for overall, and I thought that was right here that they did. They added that time, and and finally, you get service from Odegaard and Declan Rice with just a perfect header.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the technique-wise with headers, and I don't know, maybe you as someone who tries to goalkeep can speak to this. Generally, one of the things they say to do is it's better to head the ball downward, because with the keeper, that can sometimes be a more difficult ball to reach.
Yeah, at my level of play, I'm not seeing a whole lot of headers coming my way, so I can't really speak to that so much. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's I can imagine that sounds reasonable. I mean, yeah, just given the timing of it, it's really as close as you can possibly get in a soccer match to a buzzer beater, right? Because there is no buzzer, but he blew the whistle while they were still celebrating Declan Rice's goal.
I think they technically came back on for a little bit, but yeah, I mean, did
they? I thought it was during the celebration, but am I maybe wrong?
But I think probably the only comparison I can think of immediately is last season with when Reece Nelson scored, was that Brentford? When we won in the at the death, the rally from 2-0 down. Again, that same kind of thing. Just an incredible moment. And again, all the things people are saying about Declan Rice. He a bargain at 105 million. We should pay West Ham more. It's incredible how he feels like he's just been here the entire time. Yeah, he fits so seamlessly into the club, and how he just fits so seamlessly into the club, and what fits his place, and is going to, presumably, as he gets a little more comfortable. There's definitely a big leap for joining a new team between the first and the second seasons, as he gets much more comfortable and his role becomes much better defined. And imagine, there's almost another level he can find. And yeah, he doesn't score a lot of goals, but I mean, you think about it, I think he's scored twice for Arsenal. It was this goal and then the winner late against United. So
when it counts,
yeah,
look to Declan Rice.
That's and credit here too to Martin Odegaard, who after all of that in the game, and I think he's been coming around a little bit. We talked about that he had a rough stretch there, especially I think coming back from that October international break. We talked about maybe he had a little niggling injury left over from the City game, and it kind of clearly was a little sluggish and clearly not himself. Trossard was useful. There's just a lot coming off the bench. There's just a lot of. And they talked a bit about, because I didn't see as much of it to say, they said Zinchenko was a big add, that when he came off the bench, they sort of added an extra dimension. And, to have all those attacking options on the bench, really, I think, we were set up nicely there to put that extra pressure on them at the end of the game.
Oh, right. No, and you could definitely tell when you saw who was being subbed in what he was thinking, what Arteta was thinking, because, he was there on the touchline for this match, so...
Yeah, and there is no, there is. How am I trying to say this? At that point in the game, there's no downside to going for. We're level on the road against a relegation battling team. Let's go. Let's put the pedal to the metal, the handbrake off, as they say. Let's take the handbrake off. Not that we ever played with it, but really, let's win this thing. Enough is enough. We should have won this game a long time ago. Let's finish them off.
Right.
And they, took to the end, but they finally did, and everyone was excited, including Mikel Arteta, who picked up a yellow card for his celebrations.
Yeah, I did not know about that until the next match.
I thought that I was watching. Of course, at a certain point, you're not really paying attention, just kind of like
right.
In this way, running around my place, going like
yeah.
Yeah, so I'm not really paying. I don't recall hearing or seeing that anywhere in there. But yeah, then of course, either it was later in the day or the next day is like, oh, by the way, Arteta was yellow carded, and he is going to miss the next game. He is going to be not on the sidelines for the next game.
Yeah, so let's put a pin in that while we talk about something tasty and hydrating. So, of course, I am talking about Liquid IV. So, Liquid IV is something that I use when I'm all sweaty from sports. It's something that I've started to prefer as my main sports drink, where I sometimes don't even use it until I'm home from typically my son's practices or the most recent things. As I've been battling injuries, I have not laid my foot to a size 5 soccer ball in a while. But I get home, toss a packet of Liquid IV, a stick they call it, into a yay size bottle of water, about 16 ounces, they say, and it tastes good, and I don't feel thirsty anymore. So that is, of course, because Liquid IV is the category-winning hydration brand fueling your well-being, and their hydration multiplier is the one product you're missing in your daily routine. In just one stick, you get 5 essential vitamins and 2 times faster hydration than with water alone. You can use it first thing in the morning, before a workout, when you feel run down, after a long night out, and on long flights. One stick of Liquid IV in 16 ounces of water hydrates you 2 times faster and more efficiently than water alone. And they partner with leading organizations for innovative solutions to help communities protect both their water and their futures. To date, Liquid IV has donated over 39 million servings in over 50 countries around the world. So I love that it tastes great without an aftertaste. It's very convenient because you don't need a big bottle of liquid. You just chuck the little stick in your bag. And I've got some new flavors that I'm anxious to try out once I have the opportunity, once I have the need. For now, my favorite is still strawberry lemonade, but we'll see if that holds. So if that sounds good to you, if you want to up your hydration game, get 20% off when you go to liquidiv.com and use code Gooner at checkout. That is GOONER for 20% off anything you order when you shop Better Hydration today using promo code Gooner at liquidiv.com. There's also a link in the show notes or description to make it easier for you. Shop Better Hydration at Liquid IV. So, Aston Villa.
Aston Villa. So we should also add there are a lot of subplots to this game.
Yeah,
part of what makes sports fun is the narrative, right? The story that it brings into it. First, I'm sure you saw many shots on the sideline there of the Aston Villa manager Unai Emery. I assume you caught over there his connection to Arsenal. I'm sure we mentioned it.
No, I don't remember, and I missed the first 5 minutes of this match. So
Emery from I believe it was 2018 until about a year and a half, from 2018-19 and the first half of the 19-20 season, was the manager at Arsenal.
Okay,
he was the man who succeeded Arsene Wenger. An interesting figure. He is obviously Spanish. He's actually Basque, much like Mikel Arteta. Emery came in, was a manager at Arsenal for effectively a season and a half, coming into an Arsenal team that was down in the Europa League and feeling a little, like this was, sort of an end of an era, a period of transition. Came from Seville, where he had won the Europa League several times. So we talked about Sevilla as sort of the great Europa League club.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, he started that there.
Okay.
It's a very recent sort of thing for them. But he sort of started that. The idea being, okay, he's won this cup. I mean, he's a decent manager in Spain. Comes to the Premier League, he'll win a few games. Or he'll win us the Europa League. More importantly, we can get back into the Champions League quickly. Get that the money in there for helping us out financially. We went to the Champions League the Europa League final, where they were completely outclassed by Chelsea, which was a little disappointing. And down the stretch in the Premier League, Arsenal did kind of choke away a Champions League spot and finished in 5th. couple of really embarrassing losses in the late stage. But you could sort of talk yourself into, all right, we're almost there. Add a couple of players, make some changes. We're almost there. And the start of the 19 season was rough. There were there was discontent, some discontent. So a lot of it on the players, a number of players that have since been sent away for all kinds of reasons. Emery sort of lost control of the locker room. The club went on a bad run of form, and he was out. And his replacement, after a couple of interim games under Freddie Ljungberg, a former Arsenal legend, Freddie Ljungberg, then, of course, came in Mikel Arteta, and so at the beginning of the current version of Arsenal, was sort of the groundwork was laid there. So Emery's something of an interesting figure, sitting between, of course, the great Arsene Wenger and so the new greatness, possible, hopeful greatness under Arteta. I mean, on the one hand, he was given nearly an impossible job of trying to replace a legendary manager. And the club was in substantial sort of behind-the-scenes turmoil. Mm-hmm. At the same time, there were some difficulties he had, mistakes he made, things he didn't do well. He's not entirely the author of his own fate, but he played a pretty strong role in it. And so, there's a certain vindication for him. He left Arsenal, ended up getting picked up by Villarreal in Spain, then proceeded to win the Europa League with Villarreal. And then came back last year after Villa fired Steven Gerrard, came in and, really they looked good in the back half of last season and have since looked pretty good this season up to before us. We said they played Manchester City in midweek at Villa Park. Not only did they beat Manchester City, they apparently dominated that game in a way that Manchester City rarely gets. Teams rarely play that. That's what City does to them. It's not rarely something that actually happens to them, and they're under Pep and all of that. So this is a team that I think is unbeaten at home. I think it's won every home game this year. So there's a lot of they are running high. They're running very well this season, and I think for about the first 10 minutes, they looked like it.
Right. They started off super strong. That was when they produced their single goal. We were super strong compared to them, at least. The whole rest of the match, we pretty much put them on their back foot for definitely the second half of the first half, the back half of the first half. And then the second half, I think it was pretty much more of the same. It was just unfortunate. I don't know, maybe fortune isn't a sufficient explanation, but it stunk that we weren't able to convert those better.
Right. And I think, as we talked about, I mean, I don't think we were quite as dangerous as we were in the Luton game. One of the things that Villa does or did very well is they played a very hard line. You notice we were caught offside several times. Okay, some of that was part of their tactical plan, was to keep the defensive players high in a high line. And they did it to City as well. And how well is that going to last over the course of a season where everybody's poring over video and looking for little advantages? Probably not. It'll eventually probably catch up to them. It's not the most advanced tactic in the world, the offside trap, but it is one that, and I heard this pointed out somewhere, or Reddit point out, it's not something you see a lot of teams doing these days, because so many of them, especially teams that Arsenal are playing Arsenal, we see them sitting back and absorbing pressure, packing men behind the ball, parking the bus, so to speak. Rarely do you see a team like being more willing to press that high up the field and keep their defenders so high up the field that if you time your runs right, it opens up a lot of space and there's a lot of danger there. But because they do such a good job of holding their lines, there were times, especially even in those first half, even as we were putting on pressure and generating chances, we were sometimes just a touch or a step, a touch too slow or a step too quick. And that's how you wind up offside. You're frustrated when the flag goes up, but I think all the offside calls look correct to me. There were even one I was like, ooh, I want to look at that. But then you show the replay and you go, oh, no.
Yeah, and there is at least one or two where I called it offside in real time also. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the timing just being off by a step or two also, because that also contributed to not converting some opportunities also, where I remember an early one with Saka, but it happened time and again in this match where they just didn't get to the ball in enough time, or just overshot the ball by just enough that it got squandered,
Yeah, and they did a good job. Villa did a good job too. We had a couple of opportunities We got into the box. What you saw, it felt in real time. It feels like there's a hesitation to pull the trigger. You see Odegaard like, shoot, don't take another step, shoot. But then you get a second angle. You look behind, you realize the Villa players have done a good job getting in his space. And so he has to keep moving to try and find a clear look on goal. And even then, a bunch of those got blocked as well. And I think the unfortunate thing is so many of our better chances, you finally work so hard to get a shot. And the shots we put in on Martinez were... Like, I don't think he had... I can't say... You can't say a guy with a clean sheet had a bad game. But I didn't see anything Martinez did that I came away from it going, man, he was so tough to beat today.
Yeah, he did what he needed to do, and of course he heroically took a boot to the face from a teammate and played on. But I saw him putting Vaseline on his face. I guess that's what you do just to seal it off until the match is over when you're so late in the match to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure he'll take all of that to having a goal from a ball rebound off the back of his head. So
right.
But yeah, that I think is really I felt like, even though we got some more chances even in the second half, I felt like the first half was really the opportunity. Like, I think Odegaard had one that just went wide. There were a couple of plays that just sort of missed wide, and you're thinking, oh, that was the one. And if they get that one, maybe go into the half 1-1. I think it's I wouldn't say it's a very different game in the second half, but I think the fact that it's 1-1 and Villa may have to think about being more open, I think might have provided us with a few more opportunities, and we were playing more than we scored, but we didn't get the goal, and so we had to come out the second half. But more of the same.
There were a lot of yellows given out in this match, more than in recent memory, which is interesting. Usually, you expect that more with a team that's kind of lower down, where that's maybe the only tool they can rely on or something. But you don't see that. I haven't seen that as much, at least towards toward the top of the table battles.
I mean, there was a bite to it. Villa definitely was not afraid to throw their weight around a little bit, and I thought we handled that part fine. I didn't think we did. I thought we handled it well. I mean, again, anytime the yellows start coming out, it's I mean, you understand the referee's trying to get control of the match, and I think by and large, I didn't have a huge issue with too many of them, but obviously you start to get a little once someone gets a yellow card, and now anytime one of their players does anything, it's just referee. And everybody does the card, the card symbol, the card sign. So that gets kind of frustrating. But I mean, overall, I thought, there are going to be there were some controversial moments, but yeah. But overall, the yellows coming out was understandable given the way the game was going.
Yeah, no, I don't think any of them were unwarranted. It was just, it was a physical game. I missed what resulted in Zinchenko's yellow card in the first half. Do you recall what happened there?
I believe that was a tactical shirt pull that he was very clearly. It was one of those that looks kind of soft, and you see the replay, and the guy's shirt is like. Okay, yeah, you can see they get the full, the super slow look, like a full extension. You're like, okay. And again, I think it was in the service of stopping up or breaking up an attack, and so I mean, yeah, okay, take that yellow. Take the yellow. Zinchenko does the right thing there. Takes the yellow, breaks up the attack, lets them come back. Villa will feel aggrieved, but I don't care. But I mean, that's what the yellow is for, and I think we got a similar. I think we had a similar one along the way that, that's of course it happens, and you're like, we got the same thing there. So that was Zinchenko's yellow, and there were one or two more of those in this game too.
Right. Before we leave the topic yellow card, so when I saw Arteta was not on the touchline, I at first thought about, again, not seeing him get the yellow card at the end of a Luton Town match. I thought it was because of what we were talking about, where they were talking of giving him a touchline ban due to speaking out about the officiation. So that didn't happen. This was just yellow card accumulation. Right. So that's still a potential happening later on, or have they come down on it the other way yet?
No, that is kind of an odd thing. There has been no announcement about that. You're right. So there's two sort of circumstances here. One, of course, is I guess we call it an excessive celebration yellow. I guess he left his box, which is one of those frustrating hard to see because there are plenty of managers, in that circumstance, or even in goals of somewhat slightly lesser circumstances, who you see like running the length of the pitch to celebrate, and it, like to me that's a stupid yellow, like that, like fine guy, let that guy celebrate a little bit, that is even a manager, like if you can't, and I want to say it was. Maybe it might have been Bournemouth's manager, or maybe Brentford's manager, whoever he played recently. He was asked about Arsenal celebrating, and his response was basically, "Of course they're celebrating. They scored a goal. Like why is it? Why is this such a big deal?
They scored like a key goal at the last possible second. I mean, yeah,
right.
An excessive goal deserves excessive celebration.
but even beyond that, right. And obviously
it wasn't excessive. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but even beyond that, what frustrates me is we've seen plenty of managers run around. We've seen Arteta run around sometimes at critical game and not get carded for that. And so that's just kind of there amongst Arsenal fans, there is a sense that Arteta and Arsenal are being targeted by the referees. I don't know if that's quite true. I try to avoid conspiracy theories of that sort of thing, but it's as we are still, for reasons that are thoroughly unclear to me, as we are still like I don't know what the league is waiting for. Like if it's going to be a fine, assess the fine. If he's going to be suspended, suspend him. But what are we doing?
Right, that's weird.
And that was. I mean, that Newcastle was a month ago. Like again, my point of comparison are American sports, which again, it's a different environment, different things. But if somebody is suspended, including coaches, they're suspended. Then you can appeal, and then they'll have a hearing. And sometimes that delays at a couple of days, maybe a week, because you have to, find a time. Nowadays it's easy because you just get a Zoom call, but someone has to go to the league office and they plead their case and they talk about it. That might take a few days. Somebody needs an off day, that sort of thing. But now, like, it's been a month. Like, how do you not? What exactly are they waiting for? I don't understand. Yeah. That makes no sense to me whatsoever.
That's weird.
Yeah, So I guess apparently there is still a decision to be made on that. Maybe a fine, maybe something else. It would be very frustrating and would feed conspiracy theories further if a decision comes out and Arteta would be suspended, not for our next Premier League game next weekend against Brighton, but for the following one when we go to Anfield. I mean, once you start delaying it, you open yourself up to these kind of accusations, which is maybe unfair to the league. Again, the one thing you really can't do is one thing you really shouldn't do is sort of question the integrity of the event. Because, of course, that's sort of like, I watch this because I don't know what's going to happen. I watch because I think Arsenal could win, but I don't know. I have to see them play it out. And this is why, to be fair, for the league's perspective, this is why they're always so, like, they get very stringent on, this kind of commentary from coaches or from players or things like that, because the one thing that you cannot question is the integrity of the competition. Everyone watching has to be able to believe that it's real. And I say believe like it's not true. It's true. It's real. It is, that is what's happening. It is real competition. But as soon as you lose that sense, or somebody tries to say that's not the sense,
right,
that's a problem. And so that I understand why leagues are very, especially more and more these days as gambling becomes even more central, especially in the United States, but even more so even in Britain as well.
So on the topic of excessive celebration, one question that I had, and this actually pertains to the Luton match, but going back, my first exposure to this phenomenon was during World Cup last year, when you would see after a key goal or after a big win of a match, you'd see the players stripping off their shirts, and they'd talk about, and I think we even saw some yellow cards given out for that. If not red cards, I think definitely at least yellow cards. And it just seemed like such a silly thing for them to do in the first place. And then, especially when the match is already over, to give a yellow card for it. Although there are players who I did see do it and just after a goal in the middle of the match too. where and when did that practice start? And especially, like, it seems like it isn't really a thing so much in the Premier League. What got me asking about this is seeing Declan Rice take his jersey off after he scored that spectacular header at the end of a Luton Town match.
Yeah,
I think after the whistle was blown there too. Yeah.
Well, so I mean, taking the shirt off after the goal is a celebration that's been around for a while, and that has been, and this is like a decade or so ago. This is not a new rule, but basically to curb certain kinds of excessive celebration, partly for time wasting, but also for a certain sense of sportsmanship, taking your shirt off is an automatic yellow.
Right.
And it's one of those things that everybody knows that's true. Like, this has been a rule for long enough that everybody just knows that that's the rule. There's a rather silly thing going around. Last year, Richarlison, the Brazilian striker who played last year, was sold and played for Tottenham. Still plays for Tottenham, actually. Apparently, when that's his thing, when he scores a goal, he takes off his shirt. What's funny is he apparently scored a couple of goals last year that were ruled off for offside, but he had already taken off his shirt.
Oh, no.
Guess what? Yellow. So there was a joke floating around that he had actually accumulated, and I believe statistically this was true, had accumulated more yellow cards than goals last year for Tottenham. So, Spurs. Anyway, but one of the things you'll also see is a lot of guys, taking the shirts off post game. I thought an interesting thing I saw in some notes. I was thinking like the shirt trading. So you won't see it as much in league games, but you see a lot more in internationals. Guys, sort of a sign of respect after the game. You take the shirt off, especially if you and another guy have been going at it all game. Sort of as a sign of sportsmanship, you trade shirts. Shake hands and trade shirts. You see a lot of times guys want to do shirt trades, like Messi. Every time Messi plays a game, there are guys going up to him and trying to trade shirts with him. And he can be particular. There are some guys who they have collections of the shirts they get from different clubs or different players. There are some guys some players are really into that sort of thing, kind of like they collect, big name players for them other than themselves.
Yeah.
But yeah, in terms of like taking the shirt off, I mean, obviously once the whistle goes, the game's over, so you can do whatever you want. But obviously once you score, it is a yellow for taking your shirt off.
Okay. Well, that explains, because Declan Rice clearly didn't get a yellow card for doing that after the match, because he was already on a yellow from the second half. Yeah. So, or actually, you know what? No. I'm crossing notes between the two matches. He got a yellow in the second half of the Aston Villa match.
Yeah.
Nope.
Yeah. But I do want to, because we've talked about referees and cards. So there were two, arguably more, but we'll start with the two controversial decisions. The first, and I'm very curious to get your thoughts on both of them. The first was the penalty not given for the tackle on Jesus in the box, where he essentially sees his foot hooked and he goes to the ground in the box. No call, no foul. And then late in the game, was bundled under the net for the leveling goal, except not a handball on Kai Havertz.
It's painful, yeah.
So, which one do you want to talk about first?
We may as well talk about them chronologically, I think. The non-penalty call, I guess at the time, you think maybe Jesus went down a little bit easily, and I think the ref was close enough to probably judge that better than us. I think I gave him the benefit of a doubt on that one. It didn't look egregious to me, and if he didn't call it, and then especially if VAR didn't overturn it, I'm inclined to just say, okay, well, it must have been an acceptable level of contact, I guess.
Yeah. I mean,
what was your take on that one?
Yeah, I kind of agree. I think ultimately, let's put it this way. I think I can see why it wasn't given in real time. Jesus does make a meal of as they say, makes a meal of the tackle, goes down a bit easily, a little bit theatrically. There's people talking about that the old I've seen it given. Like, you could see that. The comment was made that he gets the ball. The defender does get the ball, which doesn't do anything for me. Like, I get that, but I mean, then we could also throw in. I think it was the Luton game. There was a missed penalty rather late. A guy clattered into one of our players well after the ball went, and so there was no call there. As of course not. But I guess it falls into the category for me of because they didn't immediately call it on the field, I didn't see enough, even though they looked at it, I didn't see enough to say, yeah, they're giving that one a penalty. I would have been pleasantly surprised had we gotten a penalty out of that, and I think that was, whether it was the right call or not, I'm still not sure. But I mean, I guess that sort of goes back to what are we using VAR for? Is it there to get every call exactly right, or is it there to overturn egregious errors? I just can't look at that one and say, man, that is an egregious error that has to be overturned. As much as I wanted the penalty there.
Which segues well to the second call, because that's ultimately how I feel about that one. As soon as I heard the commentators say that the on-field official called handball, I knew that there was nothing the VAR was going to find that made that an egregious error, clear mistake. There's no way that was. It was just too confusing of a situation to ever call that a clear and obvious error.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest argument against that call is more along the lines of, how does the referee know that's how did he see a handball there?
Right.
Because it's obviously in a very tight space. There's a lot of bouncing around and movement. I don't know. So part of what happened, is that we talk all the time about the hands and the arms being in a natural position, right? For defenders, like we saw with Saliba, he got a penalty, his hand was out, it hit his hand. Even though he wasn't trying, he's more balancing. That's an unnatural position. It hits his hand. That's the rule for defenders. There is no similar rule for offensive players. If it hits his hand, if the referee is a judge that it's hit his hand, then he cannot score. Now, apparently, I've seen how you interpret the rule. Part of the reason it's called back is it's because Havertz scores. If Nketiah, who's also there, is the one who actually puts it in, good goal.
Because it was a natural position.
Well, because not because of the natural position, but because when it hits his hand, regardless of what his position is, he cannot score off of that.
Oh, okay.
And so again, this is an interpretive thing. So I admit I'm not. The rules are different for attackers than they are for defenders. That's there is a double standard there when it comes to those kinds of situations.
Right. Well, but I guess where I'm coming at it from is just wanting to know, how do they define in this circumstance who's an attacker and who's a defender? I mean, is it the team that possesses the ball is all attacking? Because when you've got three players like all in close proximity to the ball, depending on who it bounced off of last, you're in an offensive or defensive position as you try to clear it.
Well, in this case, because remember, this is only for a play that takes place in the box. If that play happens in the middle of the field, nobody says anything.
Okay,
right? It's one of those that because of where it is, and at that point, you're 2 feet from the Aston Villa goal.
Yeah,
the Villa man is the defender. There's no gray area on that.
But Nketiah, even without the ball, like even if it's bounced off of the Villa player, is still considered an attacking player.
Right.
And so then it comes down to the scoring player can't have his hand anywhere near the ball, like even if it was unintentional and in natural position. Okay.
Right. And again, a lot of it has to do with the sequencing. Again, I look at that and I'm not sure how you call the handball live.
Mm-hmm.
I'm skeptical of that, I have to admit, but knowing that, and as we were watching it, I mean, of course, we wanted the goal, but obviously, the more they look at it, I mean, does it hit his hand? I think it might. I'm honestly not quite sure.
Yeah, looking at it, I could say, from my point of view, it hit his hand. The question is, did it hit it enough did it hit it enough and in a way that it deserves a call of some kind? Apparently I don't even know enough about the rules to really make an educated judgment on that. So
right, but the point is, I think the point is, as you're saying, if you think it hits his hand as the attacking player, it's a handball. So in a sense, for me, it was not so much. For me, it was a question of whether or not it really did.
It was slight, but I could kind of see it. It does make you wonder how the ref got there, because I mean, it's not like one of these. Most of the time, when it's an obvious handball where the crowd all yells at once, it's because the ball's going up and it suddenly goes down, and there's only a couple ways that could happen, right?
Yeah, there's a clear deflection, and for those are weird because obviously our angle is so different. We're up in the stands, so we're looking at it. Whereas of course when they were on the field, those things look a little bit more obvious.
But like the ball moving in like with a bend instead of like a parabola, right? Like
obviously
it has a corner in its motion.
Right, obviously you can see deflections and change of direction, of course.
Yeah.
I understand a lot of frustration. I felt a lot of frustration. It's always interesting that we record these, at least a day, in this case, 2 days after the game, sometimes a day after for the Sunday games. For me, I looked at that. At the time, I was displeased with the call. But sort of the more you go back and go, okay, I see why they did it. And, Arteta was very careful in his post-game comments. He, kind of grits his teeth. He kept saying clear and obvious.
Yeah.
Which obviously, given the circumstances, he's being very careful with what he says.
Yeah, especially he was already in a touchline ban for
which I understand why. And I think, it's always a weird thing. I was thinking about this because they're having this. So Arsblog, who's the kind of the one of the leading figures in this kind of Arsenal fan, following, blogging, podcasting space. It's sort of been on this kick in the last couple of days about how it creates this sort of environment of fear that, we can't be critical of the referees because we're worried about this kind of thing. But I'm sort of thinking about it, you think about where these comments come from. They come usually from the immediate aftermath of the game. Like right after the game's over, emotions are high. I mean, look, forget the things I said during the game, even some of the things I said in sort of the few minutes after the game before I left and, paying out my tab and all that before I left the bar. There are things that you sort of say in the heat of the moment, which, on a careful reflection, maybe you wouldn't have, or maybe you'd be able to say or frame in a way that would be, I guess I'd say, a little bit more productive in terms of potentially like, getting, changing the way these things done, as opposed to they come out in this environment where, managers these are very competitive individuals who are, deeply involved in this and feeling the emotions of the game. I mean, we were called joking that like at some point before the game's over, Arteta is going to just rip his seat out of the stands in Villa Park. He's just white knuckling it the whole time. Mm-hmm. And to ask in that moment, well, what did you think about the refereeing? Oh, I got thoughts. But you take a moment of reflection, take an hour or two, or even another day, and it's kind of, you might be able to frame it in a way that's a little more. Arsene Wenger was always famous for every time one of his players, picked up a foul or a card, did something nasty. He was sort of famous for his response. Oh, I didn't see it. Not in the sense of like, oh, I don't think it was a foul. Going, oh, he did that. Oh, I didn't see that. I was looking somewhere else. Oh, he did, huh? Oh, I don't know. That doesn't sound like him.
That's clever.
Yeah. Of course, that French accent. Oh, I did not see it. I do think I will say though, the one that bothered me was the yellow to Carlos after elbowing Eddie Nketiah in the face. I'm sorry. I find most of the explaining that one away to be. I find those unconvincing.
It should have been a red.
He looks at Nketiah. They're way off the ball. I don't blame the referee for not calling it on the field. He's obviously, it's a different part of the field. It's away from the ball. He's looking at the ball.
Yeah,
totally fine.
Right,
There's no,
right.
and that's not a criticism of the officials there. But having watched it on the replay, I'm sorry, he takes a swing at it.
Yeah.
We talk about getting this kind of violent conduct out of the game, which I am all for. I don't want to see guys getting elbowed in the face. I don't want to see it. I don't want our guys doing it. I don't want them. And maybe you're going to, and this is one of those where maybe you're going to catch a couple of guys who are just being careless as opposed to being deliberate. But I'm not bothered by that. If you elbow a guy in the face, that to me is just, that's the one I'm just really sort of bothered by.
Yeah, I can see that.
And again, we weren't particularly good in stoppage time. It looked like we kind of ran out of gas by that point. I mean, we had more of the possession. We were kind of in dangerous positions. But again, throughout the rest of the game, early on, our passing was a little bit off. We talked about the offside trap, even in the, just the end of the day, I know all the talks about officiating, but really, end of the day, and Arteta said this too, we did not take our chances. We needed to convert those opportunities. We didn't do that, and I cannot sit here and say, Arteta said we should have won based on the way we played. We dominated the game. We generated most of the opportunities, but we didn't convert, and that's I don't think it's a crisis or a long-term problem. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not sitting here saying to myself, "Oh no, the challenge is over, we're ruined." But I do think, I sort of like with the Luton game, had we not come up with that late goal, I'd have still walked away saying, points lost, but man, we just keep playing like that and we're going to be fine. I think if we keep playing for the most part like we did at the Villa game, obviously with a little bit better finishing, I think as long as we keep playing like that and keep putting pressure on the opposition, I think we're going to be okay. It's frustrating. It's annoying. Villa is very good at home. That is a tough, that's sort of been established. That is a tough place to go. Villa is very good at home. They are not very good on the road. And they still get to come to the Emirates. So
we'll see them in N5.
We will see you in London. Old friend Unai.
So who would you call for player of the week across these matches? And given that you watched more of the Aston Villa match, it's fine if you lean that way.
Yeah, but I guess part of the problem with the Villa game is I didn't walk away feeling like, man, one of our players really put in a good shift today. But I also didn't walk out of that game, and I can be critical about particular players at particular moments. But by and large, I didn't think anybody walked away from that one saying like,
right,
oh, wow, he was poor today. I mean, there was some poor defending in the build up to the goal, but honestly, like, you can't single anyone out. I'm going to say Declan Rice. Okay. The goal was huge. I thought he was fine against Villa. I thought a lot of our players were fine. I'm going to say Declan Rice again. I think the goal against Luton, to get us the result there. I think you could throw in Kai Havertz, who was dangerous. Obviously coming on, helped change the Luton game. Was dangerous in a lot of ways against Villa, including the tying goal that wasn't. But I'll say Declan Rice for winning the game in Luton.
Yeah, I'm definitely inclined toward Rice. That was such a key goal and such a key moment, executed well. But I think I'm finally ready to actually give it to Havertz. I think he's had a good run. He'd scored in, I think, 3 consecutive matches before nobody from Arsenal scored against Villa. He's had a good run. He came closest to scoring against Villa. And he's contributed to other goals. I think he's coming into his comfort zone a little bit with Arsenal. And I'm here for it, and I'm ready to call it for him for this week. So
that's fair. And there was an interesting interview. I'll see if I can find it. The Athletic last week did an interview with Jorginho, and one of the things he said was, and I'm going to butcher the exact quote, was something to the effect of, if you like football, then you love Kai Havertz. Like, he just talks about all the things he does. Like, there's clearly a lot of respect for him amongst other players, which I always think is interesting to sort of get a sense from players. A lot of their opinions sort of reflect a lot of stuff fans say, but there's always those kind of interesting opinions they hold. Like, there's clearly something they, when the guys are in the field, there's something they see that, when you're not playing or you're not in the locker room, that you just don't see. And so I was kind of curious to get their perspective on that. Not to simply say that, well, he's a player, he's obviously right, but just it's interesting to sort of get that perspective from other players, especially one like Jorginho, who's certainly a very smart player. As a good appreciation for all the different things that have to happen on the field. So
it's kind of like the difference between the Academy Awards and like the People's Choice Awards or something. You get a different perspective on the competition and who's involved. Yeah. So what's coming up for next week?
Next week, we sort of close out this stretch of 2 games a week. Tuesday, our final Champions League group stage game against PSV Eindhoven. We're away to PSV, so a nice trip to the Netherlands. I expect to see a heavily rotated side because this game does not matter. We have won the group. That's it.
Yep.
There is nothing more to be said about that. We've won the group, and I expect to see. I'll be curious to see how much rotation Arteta does, because you could easily see a lot of youth players being brought in, but you kind of don't want. It is still the Champions League. It is still going to be it is. Eindhoven is. We lost there last year in Europa League. It's a tough place to go. It's a tough test for some teenager, some youth player. But I would not be surprised to see a few guys who haven't played a lot. You probably see the aforementioned Jorginho, Jakub Kivior. He's been playing a little bit. You probably see a few more of those guys. You might see 1 or 2 of the youth players as well. I expect. Fingers crossed. Ramsdale deserves a Champions League game. For all the work he did to get us in there, I feel like he deserves an opportunity to play on that stage. But we'll see how Arteta treats that. Because then Sunday, the weekend, real big one, home against Brighton. I say a big one. Brighton has Brighton plays us very well at the Emirates. They're a good team. They're not a great one. They're not they're not a team that is they're pull up the league table here. Where are they? They are currently currently sitting in 8th, but just three, a point behind Manchester United in 6th. So they're not a bad team. They qualified for Europe last year. They're right in the mix for a European spot again. They do a great job of recognizing talent and selling it for a boatload of money. Except Trossard, we got him relatively cheap, but yeah, that's a dangerous one. They have a very good record of the last couple. I think it beaten us at least the last 2 times at the Emirates. So that's a team we cannot afford to overlook, especially after having dropped the Villa game, because of course lurking next weekend, the following weekend, just to look ahead is as we said, a trip to Anfield. That's on the 23rd, so Christmas Eve. Heading into the holidays. One other note, though, we'll obviously talk about this next week, but we record on Monday evenings. Next Monday, presumably more in the middle of the day, will be the draw for the knockout stages for the Champions League. So we will learn who we're going to play in February and March that day, and I don't know when or where that is, when it's going to happen exactly during the day, and where that's going to be necessarily televised. But keep an eye on that, because that's a fun one to see.
I remember I tried to find the Champions League group draw, and I couldn't. So I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, it usually winds up being about the middle. Those draws usually always end up being about the middle of the day in Europe, which is like right when I wake up. So usually I wake up and pull up my browser and here's your Champions League group.
Right.
Okay, let's go.
Yeah. So as mentioned, the PSV match is going to be on Paramount Plus, and Brighton is going to be on the USA Network, which means if you want to watch it live, it's either on USA or in the NBC Sports app. If you want to watch it in Peacock, you need to wait 24 hours till the next day for that replay to stream. So. Yep. All right. Well, thanks for joining us at Gooner U. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and some other places, and we appreciate you subscribing to our show and sharing it with friends. One of those places where we are is YouTube. So if you haven't checked that out, please do. I think you'll enjoy watching us as well as hearing us. And if you check us out on YouTube, give us a like, give us a subscribe. If you listen to the podcast, give us a rating. We could use those to help us find new listeners. That's always appreciated. To support the show even more, of course, you can become a Gooner U superfan for ad-free episodes and bootleg recordings available the night we record. It's only $1 a month, and there's a link in the show notes to join. Thanks again to our sponsor, Liquid IV. You can find them with a special link in our description. You can use code Gooner, Gooner, at checkout at liquidiv.com. And you can follow our show on Twitter at Gooner U Show for updates and to ask questions. Again, my name is Dove. You can find me on Twitter at Dove Frankel. With me, as always, is Keith, and you can find him in a pub watching Arsenal matches after he finishes grading his term papers.
All right.
So
go you Gooners.
Oh, that was so much longer than usual. I thought we were done.
Yep. No, I realized for some reason I missed that. That was the cue I'm supposed to give. So
that's going to be a fun one on the podcast.
We're keeping this one. Unless you want to do a special one that you just splice in later.
Why don't you give me the option? I'll see how long exactly it is.
All right. Go you Gunners.